Number 1 versus number 2, Alabama versus Auburn, Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa with College Game Day on hand. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He is Dave Shumate, lead basketball analyst at SEC Unfiltered. We are here previewing, predicting, and breaking down the game of the year in the SEC on the hardwood. Guys, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. We're powered by our friends over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today and get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/SECU to get $150 in bonus bets today. There's not a whole lot of hype that needed for this one. Number 1 versus number 2, the Crimson Tide and Tigers. The Iron Bowl on the hardwood takes place this weekend at Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa. The first of 2 showdowns with these 2 bitter rivals. I am Chris Phillips. Joining me to help break down this game, preview, predict, tell you everything you need to know and get you geared up for Saturday's matchup, Dave Shumate, lead basketball analyst at SEC Unfiltered. He joins me. Dave, what's going on, my friend? Appreciate you taking the time. And, man, I am as fired up for this one as I've been all basketball season, because this is the game, Dave, we've had circled on the calendar. Both teams have taken care of their business. It's 1 versus 2 in an Alabama-Auburn matchup on the hardwood like we have never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, wild to say. I mean, I'm an Alabama alum, grew up watching Alabama basketball. I mean, for the most part, I mean, Alabama's had their success. I mean, they're the second winningest team in SEC basketball history. Obviously, big gap between Kentucky. But if you go look at the record book, Auburn hadn't had the same historical success. But to be honest, both fan bases would be lying if they've ever saw. This is the golden age for both teams, college basketball. I mean, I remember being in college, you go get on the front row for a 49-45 game with Anthony Grant coaching Alabama, and you have, I think, who was it, Tony Barbie coaching Auburn. I mean, I grew up, you had Cliff Ellis, Jeff Lebo, Tony Barbie. I mean, all the way back to Mark Gottfried, Anthony Grant, Avery Johnson, now Nate Oats, and Bruce Pearl. So, I mean, it's a major compliment to Bruce Pearl what he's built at Auburn. I mean, he essentially is Auburn basketball. I mean, he's built it from scratch. I mean, I would say Bruce Pearl's on the Mount Rushmore of SEC basketball coaches of all time. When you factor in what he did at Tennessee, certainly Auburn. Nate Oats, what he's done at Alabama, brought a very NBA style philosophy. They're recruiting high-end guys out of the portal, high school level. He's won the SEC multiple times. He's been the number 1 overall seed. It's amazing what they brought both these programs to be, and it's amazing. It's the first 1 versus 2 matchup in SEC basketball history. You thought you may have got it at one point with Kentucky, Florida, maybe Kentucky, Tennessee at some point, maybe Kentucky, Arkansas, but no, it's the 2 in-state programs, Alabama and Auburn. You're right. It'll be a scene in Tuscaloosa on Saturday.
Yeah, going to be an absolute madhouse at both venues, obviously starting, though, Saturday, February the 15th in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at Coleman Coliseum, a 3 o'clock local time tip-off on ESPN. And, of course, like I mentioned, Dave, game day will be on hand that morning, which I'm sure the buzz and excitement's already started, like on campus and in the state of Alabama. The countdown has begun. You know, game day will be electric, and certainly the scene when they tip off at Coleman, it's going to be about as raucous and about as tense an environment as you can imagine for college basketball. You make a great point, Dave, as we dive into this matchup. It is crazy to think, you know, the 1 versus 2. There's a couple different dynamics. Number one, I didn't know it was the first 1 versus 2 in the SEC as a whole. That is really surprising when you think about some of the great programs that have rolled through. It's just never, I guess, really lined up. Now we get it. The irony, of course, Dave, that Bama and Auburn are meeting 1 versus 2 in basketball before doing so in football, I think is worth noting. And like you mentioned, you got a pair of fan bases that is as high of hopes as they had even coming into this season or years past. You would have never expected to get a 1 versus 2 kind of matchup or to get the gift of that. If we may not get this the next time these 2 teams play each other, which is in a few weeks. So, you know, don't take it for granted.
If you're on social media at all, too, I feel like the height of this rivalry right now is in the sport of men's basketball. I mean, you go on social media, you have a bunch of Auburn, Alabama fans going at it. I mean, it's always going to be there for football. But again, I think right now with how good both these programs have been in the last 5 years, I mean, you go back 6 years, both teams within the last 6 years, both teams have been to a Final Four. So, and won multiple SEC championships. So it's a compliment to both programs. Yeah, I mean, it is going to be wild. It's like you said, I mean, there's other circumstances too outside of that. We're playing for first place in the SEC, probably the number 1 overall seed. Maybe I had JBR bracketology on earlier. I asked him that question. If Alabama wins Saturday, would they, from a tournament metric perspective, would they jump Auburn too? He had a nice little discussion that we'll drop that a little later. So I don't know if it's as easy as that. I mean, I think we'll all agree. Bama's number 1 in the coaches poll right now. Auburn number 1 in the AP poll. From a poll standpoint, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, Chris. I think if Alabama win, they would move up to number 1 in the polls. Overall, number 1 seed from an NCAA tournament standpoint, TBD.
Yeah, certainly the implications, like you mentioned, Dave, when you think about the schedules for these teams upcoming and what they've got, I mean, certainly these two teams, it's a 2-horse race between Alabama and Auburn. Who's going to win the SEC regular season title? You mentioned also, I think it's interesting, Dave, on Saturday, we're going to get the top 16 seeds from the committee, if you will. We're going to find out who's slotted where. There's going to be a lot of SEC representation in those top seeds that are announced. Certainly, Bama and Auburn. That'll add a little bit of extra juice in it as well. Again, not that you need any extra juice. This is Bama and Auburn in any sport. They want to essentially kill each other. But, yeah, when you put the rankings on top, the standings on top, the pride of winning the SEC regular season, it's a really big deal. Before we go any further, Dave, I'm curious for you. You mentioned, obviously, everybody knows you're a Bama alum. Most memorable Bama-Auburn showdown on the hardwood, whether it was the Crimson Tide winning or Tigers winning, that you can recall?
Have
there been classics over the years in this rivalry or no?
Yeah, I mean, you had I thought the one 2 years ago in Auburn when Brandon Miller and them went down there was back and forth game. It was a hostile environment. I mean, there's a younger, talented Alabama team. It's like much more the talent this year's older. But I thought that was one. And I remember as a kid, I mean, this was back when Alabama would never win road games at Mark Godfrey. And Auburn was okay. And Alabama was actually really good and may have won the SEC that year in either like 2000, 2001. Auburn hit a half-court buzzer beater as time expired to win that game. I think it was tied, and they hit the half-court buzzer beater. I remember Alabama beating Chris Porter and like the number 2 ranked Auburn team with Cliff Ellis in like 90 or maybe 99, 2000, sometime in that era too at home. But yeah, no real barn burn. But I mean, they split most of the time. I mean, last year was a little bit of a wild game in Tuscaloosa. Remember the lights went out early, came down to the wire last possession. Yeah, I mean, they played some good games. I mean, you had the one in the SEC tournament a couple of years ago where the 2 strength coaches got in a fight. Auburn was up 10 and Alabama ended up winning. It was almost like the A&M Georgia game yesterday. It was like Auburn was up 10 at half and Alabama ended up winning by like 20. I think it was Avery Johnson's last year or second to last year, something like that. There's been some memorable games. It definitely doesn't top this one.
Dave, what I'm excited to watch in this game, amongst many things, but the chess match between Bruce Pearl and Nate Oats. You mentioned, I mean, Auburn basketball is Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl is Auburn basketball at this point. And then obviously the job Nate Oats has done since he got on campus building that program has been incredible. These are 2 of the best coaches in the game. Dare I say you could rank them 1, 2, or somewhere around there. I know there's some others nationally that have something to say about that. Certainly in the SEC, I think you'd probably rank them 1, 2 right now. What are you expecting from these 2 coaches in regards to the chess match and how they attack each other's personnel on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, 2 very deep teams. Like I heard somebody talking like, yeah, I think Auburn will win because they're deeper. It's like, I don't really think either team has an edge from a depth perspective. Again, now maybe does Alabama get Darian Reed back? That'll be interesting. He's game time decision for the rest of the year. Nate Oats said how both teams attack. It'll be interesting because it'll be interesting to see how Stephen Pearl, Bruce Pearl both kind of think off Alabama's performance. Because Alabama had one of their games that they do every year, if not multiple, where they go bombs over Baghdad from beyond the arc and they're shooting lights out. I mean, they shot 58%. I think when you round it up to 59%, they were shooting 63.8% late in that second half from beyond the arc, where they couldn't miss. Jaron Stevenson was 7 for 8. So Bama, just off that one game alone, I think they were around the 33% from beyond the arc for the season. That game alone, maybe they were just a tad higher, moved them up to 38% now. So like, does that kind of, because a lot of teams are letting just packing the paint and being like, no, they're not going to get to the rim. They're not going to get to the free throw line. Does Auburn kind of, hey, we may have to like face guard. We may have to cover them off ball screens. Like from a standpoint, we can't give up these shots now. They kind of look a little more locked in. So I don't know if last night affected Auburn when they were probably watching that on their way back from Nashville. But yeah, I mean, from an Alabama perspective, but again, they haven't shot well all year for the most part and still.
Dave, we lost you on the mute, my friend. We got him back. There we go. Hold on, we're still waiting on him. The Auburn hackers are working hard on Dave Shumate right now. We don't have you yet.
You got me?
There we go. Now we got you.
Sorry,
Yeah, there we
folks.
go.
Sorry,
no, you're
folks.
good.
The connector is up there. No, but I was saying Auburn plan. Could they pack the paint? That would be the initial game plan. That's what some teams are doing against Bama for a little bit until maybe last night would loosen Auburn up a little bit. So I mean, that'll be that perspective. Again, Alabama's been getting their points. I mean, they've been getting their points no matter who they've been playing, even when they haven't shot well. They've majority got their points. From their game plan, though, offensively, I mean, it all starts within Johni Broome because he's such a great passer. I think the keys to this game, CP, is I think guys like Miles Kelly and Denver Jones are going to get open shots. I think it's going to come down to can those guys hit those shots, and how many turnovers does Alabama have? If you really told me what does the game come down to? Can Auburn's 3-and-D perimeter guys that are going to get open shots, because Bama's improved offensively, I think they're going to throw a lot of different guys at Johni Broome. I think it's going to be Grant Nelson. It's going to be Clifford Amori. It's going to be Jaron Stevenson. It may even be Mo Diabate. They're going to throw bodies at him, and I think they're going to make him pass, and he's a great passer. Those guys are going to get open looks because when they go double, that means somebody's open. It's Miles Kelly, Denver Jones, maybe even Tahad Pettiford off the bench. So one of those guys is going to have a big game. In Bama, can they limit the turnovers? That is the Achilles heel of this team, and this is an older Auburn physical defense that they play at a half-court set. They press it up a little bit. You start giving the ball away, this Auburn team can extend a lead, and they're almost like a boa constrictor. So, I mean, again, Bama wants it to be in – I heard somebody say a 10, like, hey, keep it to 10 or under turnovers. That's what most coaches are going to say. Bama plays with an excessive tempo, an up-tempo style where they're going to get more possessions. They're going to put up more shots. Chris, you're not a math major, I don't think. Neither was I, but we can at least understand the more opportunities you go take, the more opportunities you're going to be given to have a negative play or something bad happen too. So I think Alabama's got to be in that little 12 to 14 turnover range. Anything above that, you're asking to get beat, especially against a team of Auburn's caliber.
Yeah, Dave, you mentioned the turnovers for Alabama, and you and I have talked about that a lot and agree that is the Achilles heel. That is the thing that worries you most about Bama, not just in a game like this, but as we get
17 last night.
Right. They're averaging, Dave, 13.4 per game. Auburn averaging 7.5 steals per game. So, I mean, it's going to be a huge part of the ball game, and it's like every other sport, right? Turnovers and limit the turnovers. Those are the things that kill you or get you the win. You look at the numbers in this matchup a little bit further. Bama averaging 90.5 points per game. Auburn 84.8. Defensively, Auburn holding their opponents to 67.7 points per game. Alabama, 78.5. So like you mentioned, Dave, because of the up-tempo, they allow a little bit more, but they score a little bit more. So it's kind of a give-and-take thing. And again, we mentioned the turnovers, a big part of the game. These two teams, ironically enough, Dave, Auburn shooting 48.6% from the field. Alabama shooting 48.4% from the field. So these teams nearly identical in that department. Alabama, 44 rebounds per game. Auburn right at 38. So a lot of similarities, but it is kind of, Dave, two contrasting styles. And I do wonder, Johni Broome's going to be a huge part, like you mentioned. I mean, we're not going to overcomplicate this thing, guys. There's going to be open looks from both sides. Who's hitting their shots? Who's able to get hot? I mean, if Bama gets hot, it's going to be really, really tough for Auburn to slow them down. But can that physical defense – and we saw it, by the way. I mean, a guy like Walter Clayton take over in the game on Saturday. He's hitting shots from the logo. There's only so much you can do if you got some guards that are getting hot. Excited to watch Mark Sears. You know, when you and I were in person, Dave, a few weeks ago, I remember I told you that I was like, man, I don't feel like he's played that great. And he still had 22 points or whatever at the game's end. So, you need your stars to step up in a game like this. Broome from the Auburn side, Sears from the Alabama side. I know it's much more than them, but it's I think whichever of those guys is a bigger night, that's probably who's going to win this contest.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. The front court, too. I mean, you got the Auburn front court, obviously, Johni Broome, Dylan Cardwell, Chaney Johnson down there coming off the bench as well. Remember, both two deep teams. Bama with a Mo Diabate, kind of a flexible, kind of can go guard 1 through 5, gets a bunch of boards. Grant Nelson, Mo Diabate, maybe you see the freshman Aiden Sherrill. That'll be a big matchup too, but I think it's going to be very simple at the end of the day. Yeah, that'll have a big say in it. How many points Mark Sears has? Does Bama shoot well from beyond the arc? Yeah, that'll be key. But like we mentioned earlier, I think it really is going to come down to Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly are all going to get opportunities, I think, to hit some shots. Do they? and how many extra possessions does Alabama give Auburn off turnovers? I think that's going to kind of be the possession. Because, I mean, you never know, dude. Those three guys could not be shooting well, but you go turn the ball over 16, 17 times. You give them 3 or 4 extra chances. Auburn wins by 3. That's kind of the difference. You gave them a couple extra possessions. They got a couple of tries. Auburn's a really good basketball team. They're going to take advantage of that. So I think that's going to be the X factor. And again, I mean, Coleman Coliseum should be a total frenzy. And again, we know more than any other sport, home court advantage in basketball is a massive deal. Alabama under Nate Oats has been really good at Coleman Coliseum. And Bruce Pearl's only beat Alabama under Nate Oats one time in Coleman Coliseum. And that was the Walker Kessler Jabari Smith team.
Dave, that being said, let's lock in some predictions for this contest. 1 versus 2, game of the year. Of course, the first of 2 meetings between these two teams. You know, you look at this game, Dave, I think this one's destined to be a classic. I really do. I think with the emotions, the back and forth, I think it's going to be like 2 heavyweight fighters going blow for blow. I think this thing is going to go the full 12 rounds. Dave, I'm curious which way, we were talking about this a little bit off here. I'm curious which way the public is going to go here, because I think you've made great points this week, Dave, that I think Auburn, the floor is higher, to your point. They're a little bit more consistent. I watch Bama and they play a little bit more reckless. I mean, it's just, you know, you can, but what's crazy is you'll watch them and I'm like, man, they're sloppy, they're reckless, they're turning it over. They also won by 20 points. So I think it just goes to show, when you talk about the ceiling and how good they can be, this Alabama team is for real. I will not be surprised, Dave, and I hate to come at you with the boring take here, but I won't be surprised if, as good as these two teams are, we see a split in this season series and both home teams win. Because you make the point, on your home floor with the emotions behind this one, I mean, the rivalry, it doesn't need anything else, but with the 1 versus 2, the standings, the fight for the SEC regular season title, when these teams are on their respective home floors, I mean, they're going to be leaving blood, guts, sweats, and tears and everything else in the chamber that they can to get these wins. That reason, I like Alabama at home, Dave, to find a way. I think it'll be another hot shooting day. The turnovers scare me a little bit, but I do think on the home floor, Alabama able to edge out Auburn late. Give me Crimson Tide 88, Auburn 86, in a game that, again, Dave, I think is just destined to be a classic. Probably both times these two teams meet.
Yeah, you're right. You bring up a good point about emotions. Auburn, I think, plays a lot off emotion. You got Chad Baker-Mazara, a very highly emotional guy. Johni Broome plays with some emotion. That's going to have to be kept in check. You know they're going to be getting heckled. It's probably more than they've ever been. I mean, it's going to be a scene that we haven't seen either team's been a part of. So the first 4 minutes, it'll be interesting if it's a little sloppy just from an emotion. Again, both teams are going to say, hey, it's another game. We're playing for first place in the league. But it is, you add in, obviously, the rivalry a little bit.
Do you think we see it get chippy, Dave?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think
the physicality, man, they're going to be banging bodies.
Auburn gets chippy with Vanderbilt. Yeah. That's Auburn's a little bit like the 80s Pistons, whether they kind of want to, like, they play the bad boy a little bit. Again, they're older guys. The average age of that team, I think, is around like 24 years old. Like, they're a bunch of older 5th, 6th-year guys in college basketball. So, I mean, they play with a chip on their shoulder, but I think that's part of why they're so good. They play with that little edge and cockiness and a little arrogance, which I think plays to the momentum of their team and how they play. But again, CP, I mean, Bama's been really good at home. I think Bama needs this game more because their schedule, I mean, Bama has the hardest remaining schedule in college basketball. They don't have every game left on their schedules against a ranked opponent right now. I mean, we still got they're 10. We got 7 more conference games. I mean, they go at Missouri right after this game. And then Kentucky comes to town. I mean, so it's life in the SEC, but Auburn has a little bit more manageable schedule. And you also got to add, Auburn gets Bama again at home in the last game of the regular season. So that's a benefit to them. I think just Bama at home. I mean, again, at home, you get a favorable whistle at times. I think Auburn's physicality, can they keep their emotions in check, could be the difference there. I don't know. I think Bama's playing really well right now. I feel like they're feeling themselves. They're getting a little healthier. Auburn doesn't look bad. I just feel like you've seen a little bit of a chink in the armor in the past week. Even against Vanderbilt, Johni Broome looks a little like, I don't know. He's not 100% healthy. You can tell it's Lincoln. Again, he's a walking double-double. He didn't have a double-double last night. He only had 17 and 7. But normally he's a walking double-double. So I'm not worried about him. He just doesn't look completely himself, but still a very good player. I just think at the end of the day, Bama at home gets it done with the crowd behind them. Give me Bama 82-78. I think I'm going to go Bama 82-78 here. Bama gets the home dub, much needed. I think for Bama to win the SEC, they have to win on Saturday. I don't necessarily think that's true for Auburn. I think in a series, maybe Auburn wins this because they're a little bit more physical team, but I think Bama surprises people this year. I mean, I think Bama's a little bit more physical, can play that style than people think. I mean, look at Mississippi State. I mean, Bama beats Houston almost damn near every year, and they're the most physical team in the country. So I sometimes that gets a little overblown, but man, it is going to be a fun game. Like you mentioned, will there be chippiness? For sure. I mean, that's in Auburn's arsenal, like this basketball team. And again, I use that as a compliment. It's why they're so good. They play with that. But I just think Bama at home, it's going to be the difference. Home court advantage in college basketball is a total X factor. It matters more than any other sport. Give me Bama by 4 at home.
It's going to be a fun one to get an all-time classic at Coleman Coliseum. Once again, a 3 o'clock local time tip-off. We'd love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments. Let us know who you think is going to get the dub. And, Dave, I cannot wait to see what the spread is on this game as well. Our friends over at FanDuel, which, of course, want to mention we're brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you miss the first few minutes of the game or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle to the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 and up and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 and up and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued at non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Once again, guys, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Cannot wait to watch this game on Saturday. And let me remind you, my good friend to my left, I suppose, maybe it's my right. Either way, my good friend Dave Shumate, lead basketball analyst at SEC Unfiltered, will be live with you after all the action to react to it, give his full thoughts late on Saturday. You do not want to miss that. Once again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. For Dave Shumate, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate you all, and we will talk to you on the other side.